All right, today we'll be painting with coffee. All right, welcome back everybody. Today we're gonna do something a little fun for today's video. So coffee is one of my favorite food groups. I'm quite literally drinking a cup as I record this voiceover, so cheers. Anyways, I've done a lot of watercolor paintings in the past. If you've followed this channel for a long time, you probably know that. And I just wondered how different could it be, so I brewed up some coffee. This is actually a double shot of espresso. I figured this would be the most concentrated and darkest coffee I could get to paint with, besides brewing something that's like way too strong. I wanted to like paint with something that someone would actually drink. So I brewed a double shot of espresso, and I figured hopefully it would be strong enough. I'm well versed enough in watercolors that I know usually when you mix watercolor with a lot of water, it might look dark, but it's not actually, and you'll put it on the page and you can practically not see it. So I hoped it would be darker than that, and luckily enough it was. I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, it was still pretty faint, but it wasn't invisible. I could see it really clearly. The camera picked it up really well, and it just worked. I was kind of worried that it would be like some watercolors that don't build up levels very nicely. I know some cheaper watercolors that I've used in the past, you can't really layer them. Like it comes a point really early on where you just can't get it any darker. And luckily, it was better than really cheap watercolors. Coffee was able to build up layers quite nicely. There was a point where I couldn't get darker, like on the darkest part of the eye, I just couldn't get darker. And it's not very dark, but it's better than I expected for using coffee as a painting medium. Okay, sorry, I'll stop slurping my coffee now. So I was pleasantly surprised with how this turned out. When I started the idea for the video, I didn't know what I wanted to paint. I knew it needed to be fairly monochromatic already because I can't obviously get more than one color with coffee. It's going to be orangish brown no matter how I brew it. So I don't really know how a fox popped into my head, but it popped in my head. It's literally like white and orange. So it'd be pretty easy to paint. I just leave some of it white, and the brown coffee actually turned out pretty darn orange, so it matched. And also, I have actually painted a fox here before on this channel. If you want to go see that, it's very old. My style has changed so much, and that's the main reason I wanted to paint something I've already painted before. So if you go back at like my gouache tips video, I paint a fox, totally different. I have very much improved as an artist since then, and my style has changed considerably, which you can tell if you go back and watch that video. I'll actually link that video up in the top right corner if you want to see that and see how much I've progressed. So now to talk about the actual painting. I've gotten into very like loose, more abstract watercolor where you're building up an image off of more abstract lines and shapes. And so that's what I tried to do with this fox, and I think it turned out really nice. I started out with actually some of the darker areas to build up a first level because I figured I might do some glazing, which if you don't know, glazing is kind of like layering in watercolor. You can do one complete wash and put down just like the shadows you want and then go over the whole painting with a certain color if you want, and those parts will get even darker and the whole painting will then transfer to another color other than white. So I tried to do that. I did notice that if I went back over some coffee that had pretty much dried, it did pick back up, which was kind of annoying. It wasn't like a true watercolor where it's pretty permanent after it dries and you can't pick it back up with water. I mean, some you can, but it was kind of more like gouache in the way where the line like almost completely went away when I went back over it a second time and scrubbed it. So I wasn't quite able to do a glaze like I wanted to do. It just turned out a little bit looser when I tried to do that, but I don't hate it. I think it looks nice. It looks like a pretty kind of just light watercolor painting. So I started with those darker areas like the eyes and the nose just because as I built up layers, I know I wanted those to be the darkest. So if I kept touching those up, I was fine with those getting darker. And then I went in and got kind of the darkest lines, like the whiskers and stuff, and around the eye where I wanted it. So once again, when I went back over it, those areas would get just darker as I kept working on the painting, which was fine because those are the darkest areas of the painting. So unlike how you should paint with watercolors where you go lightest to darkest, I kind of started with darkest first, but then I went straight into light and then I worked back up to fill back in the painting. So I kind of just looked at my reference image. I lightly sketched out from a reference image that I found on Pinterest of this fox, and I just kind of went off like the direction of the fur, kind of like the grain of the fur, I guess you'd call it, and kind of paint in that general direction so it looks like it has a lot of shape and dimension. And then towards the end, once I got all the light areas that I wanted, I went in and I added like more longer strokes and thicker strokes to show more areas of that orange fur. Another thing I noticed that worked really well with this was to create jagged abstract shapes for the fur. So in like the bottom left and right hand corner, I have those kind of jagged shapes and they make it look like a fox kind of, as well as like the top in between the ears. I kind of like did little dots and just pressing the tip of the brush down in a sporadic random way to just kind of make it look like it's got fur and it's not necessarily even. And then with something like the ear, like the inner ear, there was lots of like fur and how it like covered the hole in the ear, I guess. But I couldn't really convey that with a lot of realism in the style I was going for, so I kind of just mimicked the shape, and I honestly think it looks really good. Like, I think the ear in the top right hand corner is one of the strongest parts in the whole painting, as well as the two eyes. I'm really impressed with especially how the right eye turned out. That eye is good. I really like how that eye turned out. I was kind of worried at first because I was having trouble getting the paint really dark, but luckily the pencil sketch I already had there on the eye was the darkest in the whole sketch by accident, and when I covered it up with the coffee, it actually the pencil kind of started to look like it was the coffee. Like, it's definitely darker there because I had darker pencil lines there, but if you just looked at it, you might very well think that it's just the buildup of the actual coffee there. So I did have a little bit of trouble towards the end here. You can tell I'm trying to bring the nose out. I had a little bit of trouble because the orange on the nose kind of blended in with the orange behind the nose. So I tried to bring the nose out a little more, which I think I was successful with, but I was having a lot of trouble because once again, in those areas, I kind of reached the point where the coffee wasn't going to get darker if I layered it more. So I had a little bit of trouble with that. And then I also noticed when I looked through the display on the camera, a lot of the areas still looked really white. So I kind of just went in with some of the water I had been using to wash my brush off, which kind of got tan after a while, to just smooth out the whole thing and get rid of those really, really white spots. So overall, I really liked how this turned out. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to like, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel. It goes a really long way in supporting me, and I hope to see you guys for the next video. Bye.